The air in Stone Town was a heady perfume, a lover's sigh of clove, salt, and yesterday's rain. Amara knew its every note. She could distinguish the sharp tang of green mangoes being sliced at a market stall from the sweeter perfume of the ripe ones in her own kitchen. She could trace the scent of brine on the Kaskazi wind as it swept in from the Indian Ocean, a promise of the does returning at dusk. This island, Zanzibar, was not just her home. It was the blood in her veins, the rhythm of her heart. Her father, Baba Juma, was a man carved from the same ancient wood as the dhows he captained. His hands, calloused and mapped with the stories of 1,000 voyages, could read the sea better than any scholar could read a book. He was her anchor, her compass, a man whose quiet dignity was the pride of their small community, tucked away in the labyrinthine alleys of the old city. The storm broke not over the sea, but within the cool coral stone walls of their home. It arrived in the form of 2 grim-faced policemen and a man whose suit was as slick and dark as an oil spill on pristine water. His name was Mr. Onyango, a name whispered with the same reverence and fear one might reserve for a djinn. He was a moneylender, a weaver of financial webs from which no one ever truly escaped. Baba Juma stood tall, his face a mask of confusion that slowly hardened into disbelief. "There is a mistake," he said, his voice the low rumble of distant thunder. "The cargo was spices. Only spices." Mr. Onyango smiled, a chilling slash of white in his dark face. "A discrepancy in the manifest, Juma. A very expensive discrepancy. The authorities found ivory hidden beneath your clothes. A pity? It was a lie. A venomous, calculated lie. Everyone knew Onyango used desperate men as unwitting mules, and when a shipment was compromised, he fed the smallest fish to the sharks to save himself. Now, her father was the small fish. They took him away. The heavy, carved teakwood door of their home, a door that had welcomed generations, slammed shut on Amara's world, leaving only silence and the lingering foul scent of Onyango's cologne. The price for her father's freedom, Onyango's man later explained with a sneer, was a sum so vast it made Amara's breath catch in her throat. It was a king's ransom, an impossible mountain of shillings she could never hope to climb. She had 3 days. The first day was a blur of desperate pleas. She went to relatives, their faces etched with sympathy, but their pockets empty. She went to community elders who wrung their hands and spoke of praying to Allah, offering condolences as if her father were already gone. The second day was a slow, crushing descent into despair. She tried to sell her mother's heirlooms, intricate silver jewelry from Oman, but the merchants offered only a pittance, their eyes greedy and knowing. The walls of the city, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a prison closing in. It was, on the evening of the second day, as she sat numbly at the Forodani Gardens, watching the sun bleed into the ocean, that a whisper found her. It came from Mama Salima, an old woman whose eyes held the wisdom of a survivor and the cynicism of one who had seen the worst of men. She sat beside Amara, her presence as quiet as the dusk, and watched her for a long time. "There are debts," Mama Salima said, her voice raspy like dry leaves skittering on stone, "that cannot be paid with shillings. But a woman's value, that is a different currency." Amara recoiled, shame and anger a hot flush on her cheeks. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting nothing," the old woman said, unfazed. "I am merely observing. Your father is a good man. Your beauty is a gift from God. Sometimes, one gift must be sacrificed to save what is most precious. She spoke of a man, a foreigner, but not a tourist. A man with Zanzibari blood who had returned from across the seas. He was restoring the old Beit al-Hamsa, the House of Whispers, a crumbling palace on the edge of the city. He was wealthy, solitary, and, she insinuated, lonely. He seeks authenticity, a true taste of the island. He would pay for an evening of genuine companionship, a night of stories, of culture, a night that would be worth more than your father's freedom. The euphemisms were a thin veil over a brutal truth. Mama Salima was a broker of flesh, dressing her trade in the silks of cultural exchange. The man would be buying an experience, and Amara would be the main attraction. Her innocence, her virginity. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. It was everything she had been raised to cherish, the core of her honor, her future. But then, she saw her father's face, his kind eyes, the gentle way he'd always smoothed her hair and called her Zahra Wangu, my flower. She saw him languishing in a squalid cell, his spirit being chipped away day by day. The choice was no choice at all. It was a chasm, and she had to leap. "Tell me his name," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. His name was Kalen. Kalen stood on the balcony of the Beit al-Hamsa, the sea breeze a cool balm against the humid night. Below him, the palace courtyard was a symphony of restoration. By day, it was chaos, the clang of hammers, the shouts of masons, the scent of wet plaster and sawdust. But by night, under the silver wash of the moon, it was magic. He could almost hear the whispers of the sultans and princesses who had once walked these halls. He had come to Zanzibar to find something he'd lost before he was even born. A sense of belonging. His grandfather had been a Zanzibari spice trader who had fled during the revolution, leaving behind everything but his memories. Kalen had grown up in London on those memories, stories of a paradise scented with cinnamon and ruled by the tides. He had become a successful architect, a builder of sterile glass and steel towers, but his soul had yearned for the texture of coral stone, the intricate geometry of a Swahili archway. Yet, his return was lonelier than he had imagined. He was an outsider looking in, his wealth a barrier, his foreign accent a constant reminder of his otherness. He admired the culture from a distance, a spectator at the beautiful, vibrant play of life in Stone Town. That was why Mama Salima's proposition, strange as it was, had intrigued him. The old woman had been introduced to him as a cultural liaison. She had spoken of a young woman from a good family, a keeper of old traditions, who could, for a generous gift to her family, share an evening with him. Not as a guide, but as a companion. To share a meal, to tell the stories behind the henna patterns, to explain the language of the Kanga. It felt authentic. A way to bridge the gap between his world and theirs. He had no illusions, but he was also not a man who bought women. He envisioned a quiet, respectful evening, a candle-lit dinner, a conversation that went deeper than the pleasantries he exchanged with his staff. The gift, he assumed, was a customary if steep fee for such a private, curated experience. He was a fool, he would later realize, for his romantic interpretation. He had prepared the rooftop terrace himself. Cushions of deep crimson and gold were scattered on Persian rugs. Lanterns, their glass panes painted with delicate flowers, cast a soft, flickering glow. The air was perfumed with jasmine and the scent of the sea. A small table was set, with a traditional Swahili dinner he'd had his cook prepare: coconut fish curry, fragrant pilau rice, and fresh mangoes. He wanted to show respect. He wanted to understand. When she arrived, escorted by a silent youth who melted back into the shadows, she took his breath away. She was more beautiful than Mama Salima had described, draped in a flowing midnight blue. Bree ee bree bree ba bwee bwee that veiled her form. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed to absorb the sounds around her. When she lowered the veil, her face was a masterpiece of delicate strength. High cheekbones, a full mouth that seemed made for secrets, and large, dark eyes that held a universe of sorrow. It was the sorrow that struck him first. It was a profound, deep-seated grief that seemed at odds with the supposed nature of their meeting. "Welcome," he said, his voice softer than he'd intended. "Karibu." Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. The palace was more beautiful than she could have imagined, a dream of archways and intricate carvings. And the man. He was not what she had expected. She had steeled herself for someone old, lecherous, demanding. But Kalen was young, his face handsome in a way that was both foreign and familiar. There was a kindness in his eyes, a gentleness in his posture that disarmed her. It made this transaction, this cold, hard bargain, feel infinitely more complicated, more shameful. She had prepared herself for this night as a lamb prepares for slaughter. She had bathed in water infused with rose petals and ilang-ilang, her limbs feeling heavy, disconnected from her soul. Her aunt, thinking she was preparing for a secret courtship, had painted intricate henna patterns on her hands and feet, vines and flowers that now felt like beautiful shackles. She wore her finest kanga, a cloth of vibrant orange and gold, a secret defiance, a splash of life against the death of her innocence. They ate in near silence. Kalen tried to draw her out, asking about the city, about the spices in the food. Amara answered in monosyllables, her voice a barely audible whisper. Her throat was tight with unshed tears. She could not taste the food, could not appreciate the beauty of the setting. She was an actress on a stage, waiting for the final, terrible scene. After the meal, he led her to the cushioned area overlooking the sea. The lights of the fishing boats twinkled on the dark water like fallen stars. "Tell me about your henna," he said, his voice a low, gentle murmur. He gestured to her hands, which she had kept clenched in her lap. "Ma'am,